Learn Japanese history.
We are your navigators, Taro and Hanaka.
Welcome. Today we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating period, the Kishu reforms.
Right, we're talking early 18th century Japan. This is just after the 7th shogun, Ietugu, who was quite young, passed away.
And his death kicked off a bit of a succession issue, didn't it? Leading to Yoshimune from the Kishu domain stepping up.
Exactly, and he inherited, well, a tricky situation. The shogunate itself, and actually a lot of the domains too, were facing serious money problems.
You mentioned domains even trying to monopolize local goods just to, make ends meet.
Yeah, it was getting quite desperate for some. Heavy borrowing from merchants in Osaka, Kyoto.
Yeah.
That was becoming a real issue.
And not just for the lords, right? I read that the lower-ranking samurai were also struggling financially. Poverty was increasing.
Definitely. Many were falling into debt, needing side jobs. It wasn't the picture of stability Yoshimune wanted.
Okay, so our mission today is to really unpack these Kishu reforms. What did Yoshimune actually do, and did it, help fix things?
Let's get into it. So Yoshimune, his path to becoming shogun wasn't straightforward, as we said, coming after that succession crisis.
And once he was in charge, what was his big vision?
He really admired the very beginning of the Tokugawa shogunate, particularly the time under Ieyasu, his great-great-grandfather.
So looking back to the founder as the ideal, strong leadership, central control.
Precisely. He saw that early period as a model for, strong, effective governance. His main goal was definitely to boost the shogunate's power and, well, tighten up the administration across the board.
Okay, that makes sense as a starting point.
Right.
So let's talk specifics. The biggest headache seems to have been the finances. What were his first steps there?
Fiscal reform was absolutely central. Right at the top of the list were strict austerity measures. They called them Kanyakure frugality edicts.
Frugality edicts aimed at who?
Well, officially at both the samurai class and the townspeople. Things had gotten quite luxurious, especially in the previous Genroku era, and Yoshimune wanted to curb that.
So reining in spending on, fancy ceremonies or building huge temples?
Exactly that kind of thing. But he also needed to directly tackle the shogunate's own dwindling coffers. A really significant policy here was the age-mei system.
Age-mei.
Yes.
So that involved rice, right?
Yes. It essentially required the daimyo, the regional lords, to contribute rice directly to the shogunate.
How much rice are we talking about?
It was set at 1/100th or 1% of their domain's official rice yield, the kokudaka.
1%, okay. And what did the daimyo get out of this? Why would they agree?
Well, there was a trade-off. In exchange for this rice contribution, their time commitment for Sankenkotai, that's the alternate attendance system where they had to spend time in Edo, was cut in half.
Oh, interesting. So less time and expense staying in Edo in return for rice.
You got it. And this age-mei system, it lasted for nearly a decade. It definitely gave the shogunate a needed boost in rice supplies, even if it was temporary. A strategic move.
A clever way to manage resources and obligations. Were there other financial reforms?
Yes. Another important one was the Tashidaka no sei. This changed how government officials received their stipends, their salaries.
How so? What was the change?
Previously, getting promoted often meant a permanent hereditary increase in your stipend. The Tashidaka system made it so the extra pay was only given while you actually held that higher office. It wasn't permanent or passed down.
So the pay boost was tied directly to the job itself, and only for as long as you did it.
Exactly. The idea was twofold. Control government spending over the long term, and maybe, just maybe, encourage appointments based more on merit for that specific role rather than just status.
Makes sense. Okay, so cutting costs, managing stipends. Did he also try to, increase income, find new revenue streams?
Absolutely. He was very proactive about Shinden Kaihatsu developing new rice fields.
Creating new farmland.
Yes, and interestingly, the shogunate actively sought investment from wealthy merchants to help fund these large-scale reclamation projects.
So private investment in public infrastructure, essentially.
Kind of, yeah. And you can still see the legacy of this. Lots of new farming villages, the Shinden, appeared along rivers like the Musashi River or around big irrigation projects like the Minuma Diversion Canal. It was a direct effort to grow the agricultural base.
More land, more rice, more potential tax revenue.
That was the plan. However, there was another side to increasing revenue. Yoshimune also increased the tax rates on lands directly controlled by the shogunate, the bakuri.
And how did that go down?
Not well, unfortunately. While it did bring in more funds for the shogunate, it placed a heavier burden on the farmers living there.
leading to problems.
Yes, and it definitely fueled discontent and contributed to a rise in peasant uprisings, hakushiki. It's a bit of a paradox, actually.
How so?
Well, generally speaking, total rice production, the kokudaka, was actually going up during the Edo period. But Japan's population kind of leveled off from the 18th century, so theoretically there was more wealth being produced per person.
But the way it was taxed and distributed caused friction.
Exactly. It highlights that tension between the need for government revenue and the burden on the agricultural population.
Oh, okay, so finances were complex. But the reforms weren't just about money, were they? You mentioned industry and learning, too.
No, absolutely not. Yoshimune had a broader vision. He understood that economic diversification and practical knowledge were also key, so he actively encouraged growing new types of crops.
Like what?
Things like sweet potatoes, satsumaimo, also sugarcane, and even experimenting with Korean ginseng.
Sweet potatoes. That seems like a practical choice. Still important today.
Hugely important. They grow well in poorer soil and are nutritious, a great famine relief crop. And there's a key figure associated with promoting them, Aoki Konyo.
Ah, Okikonyu. Yes, the sweet potato sensei, some call him.
Yes. He was a scholar interested in rangaku, or Dutch learning. This was one of the few ways Western knowledge was trickling into Japan at the time.
And Yoshimune was okay with this foreign learning.
He actually relaxed the rules a bit. He allowed the import of European books translated into Chinese, provided they weren't about Christianity. He wanted jitsugaku, practical learning.
Knowledge that could be used for, say, agriculture or industry.
Precisely. And Aoki Konyu, using this kind of practical approach, wrote books like the Kanshoki, arguing for sweet potato cultivation, really pushed for it based on, actual study.
Fascinating. A pragmatic approach to knowledge. Okay, what about the legal side of things and social policies?
Also key areas. And here, the name Shoka Tadasuke is crucial.
Chikara Darasuke, famous magistrate, right? Often pops up in stories.
The very same. He served for a long time as the Edo Machi Buguch, basically the city's chief administrator and judge, a hugely powerful role. Later, he became Jishubugu, overseeing temples and shrines. Yoshimune relied on him heavily for legal reforms.
What kind of reforms did Shuka oversee?
A major achievement was compiling the Kujigata Osada Megaki. Think of it as a sort of legal code.
Codifying the laws.
Yes. It brought together existing shogunate laws and legal precedents into a more organized collection. The aim was to make legal judgments more consistent, more predictable, less arbitrary.
That sounds like a significant step towards a more formal legal system.
It was. And another issue was the sheer number of lawsuits, especially about money lending, which was becoming really common.
Courts getting overwhelmed.
Pretty much. So they issued the Hakuryu Domrei. This directive basically told people involved in money disputes to try harder to sort it out themselves through negotiation before bringing it to the officials.
An attempt to encourage mediation and reduce the caseload.
You could see it that way, yeah. Manage the system's resources.
And on the social side, anything stand out?
Yes, something quite remarkable, actually. Yoshimune set up suggestion boxes called Measubako.
Suggestion boxes. For ordinary people.
Yes, placed in front of the Yujusho Council Hall. It was a way for commoners to submit petitions or ideas.
A direct channel, sort of?
Well, not directly to the shogun, but a formal way for grievances and suggestions to be heard. And it actually led to something concrete.
Oh, yeah. What?
A suggestion from a commoner, submitted through the Measubuko, directly resulted in the creation of the Yusho.
What was the Yusho?
It was a free medical clinic for the poor, established inside the Koshikawa Herb Garden that's now the University of Tokyo Botanical Garden.
Wow, a free clinic based on a public suggestion. That's pretty impressive. Shows a level of responsiveness.
It really does. It's a fascinating example from that period.
Okay, so taking all this together, the fiscal measures, promoting industry and learning, the legal and social changes, how should we assess the Kyushu reforms overall? Were they like a success story?
It's mixed, really. They definitely had some positive initial impacts. There was some success in stabilizing finances for a time, and the push for industry and practical learning was significant.
There's always a but, isn't there?
Often.
Yeah.
As we mentioned, the higher taxes on shogunal lands caused real hardship and led to more peasant unrest, the Haifusha Iki.
Right, so solving one problem potentially worsened another.
And the fundamental issue of volatile rice prices didn't go away. That continued to be a major source of economic instability. So while Yoshimune's reforms were ambitious and addressed many key problems,
They didn't fix everything.
no, they didn't solve all the underlying structural issues. the shogunate still faced significant challenges later on.
Okay, so let's quickly recap. The quiche reforms under Tokugawa Yoshimune were this major effort to revitalize the shogunate in the early 18th century.
Right. Key elements were trying to fix the finances through austerity, the age-my rice contributions, the Tashidaka stipend changes.
And boosting the economy through new crops like sweet potatoes, encouraging practical learning, even allowing some controlled import of non-Christian Western books.
Don't forget the legal side, Shoka Tadasuke, the Kujigata Osaramagaki Code, trying to manage lawsuits.
And that amazing Yuchusho free clinic, born from the Mayasubako suggestion box.
Exactly. It was a comprehensive attempt to respond to the pressures of the time. A really important moment in understanding how the Tokugawa shogunate tried to adapt and maintain control.
Definitely. And thinking about those mixed results, it does make you wonder, doesn't it? What were the most important long-term effects of these reforms on the shogunate? And maybe more broadly, what can this period teach us about the challenges of trying to reform a complex system, balancing stability, revenue, and popular discontent? Something to think about. Thanks for digging into this with me today.